Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every comfortable lie you've been told about human nature, about relationships, about power, and about your place in this brutal theater we call existence. Thomas Hobbes understood something that most people spend their entire lives running from: that life is a war of all against all, that beneath every smile, every handshake, every declaration of friendship, lies the cold calculation of self-interest. And once you truly grasp this fundamental truth, once you stop flinching from its implications, you will possess a power that most people can never imagine. You will understand the one principle that governs every human interaction. Scarcity creates obsession. Abundance breeds contempt. Right now, as you listen to these words, you are probably giving too much of yourself away. You are probably available, accessible, predictable. You answer every call, respond to every message, show up whenever someone needs you. You think this makes you valuable, but you are dead wrong. In the state of nature that Hobbes described, where there is no sovereign power to enforce order, humans exist in a perpetual state of conflict because resources are limited and everyone wants what the other has. But here's what most people miss. This isn't just about material resources. It applies to attention, to emotional investment, to your very presence. When you make yourself abundant, when you are always there, always giving, always available, you become like air, essential but taken for granted, invisible until someone can't breathe. The harsh reality is that human beings do not value what they can easily obtain. This isn't cynicism, this is biology, psychology, and thousands of years of evolutionary programming. We are wired to pursue what retreats from us, to desire what seems just out of reach, to obsess over what we might lose. When you are always present, always giving, always saying yes, you trigger none of these ancient mechanisms. Instead, you become furniture in their lives, useful perhaps, but utterly unremarkable. You become the person they call when they need something, not the person they think about when they don't. But the moment you withdraw, the moment you become scarce, something fundamental shifts in the human psyche. Suddenly they notice your absence. Suddenly they wonder what you're doing, who you're with, why you're not responding as quickly as you used to. This isn't manipulation. This is human nature operating according to its most basic laws. Hobbes knew that in a world without absolute authority, every individual is constantly assessing threats and opportunities, constantly calculating who has power and who doesn't. When you are abundant, you signal that you have no power, no options, no alternative sources of fulfillment. When you are scarce, you signal the opposite. The brutal truth is that most people will never appreciate you until they think they might lose you. This applies to friendships, romantic relationships, professional connections, even family dynamics. The people who currently take you for granted, who assume you'll always be there, who treat your attention like a bottomless resource, these same people will suddenly find you fascinating the moment you start pulling back. They will begin to see qualities in you they never noticed before. They will start to wonder what they might be missing. They will, quite literally, become obsessed with regaining what they suddenly fear they no longer have guaranteed access to. This is not about playing games or being manipulative. This is about understanding the fundamental economics of human attention and desire. Every relationship operates on principles of supply and demand, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. When you oversupply your presence, your attention, your emotional availability, you create a market condition where your value plummets. Not because you are less valuable as a person, but because abundance, of anything, reduces perceived worth. This is why people chase after busy individuals, why they want to join exclusive clubs, why they desire what seems difficult to obtain. Scarcity signals value in ways that our rational minds often refuse to accept, but our primitive brains understand perfectly. Look at your own behavior. Think about the people you find most intriguing. Are they the ones who are always available, always eager to please, always ready to drop everything for you? Or are they the ones who have their own lives, their own priorities, who sometimes say no, who maintain a certain mystery about their time and attention? If you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that you too are more drawn to those who don't make themselves completely available. This isn't a character flaw, it's human nature. And once you understand this about yourself, you can begin to understand how to harness it in your own life. The transformation begins when you start treating your time, attention, and presence as the finite resources they actually are. Every moment you spend with someone is a moment you cannot spend elsewhere. Every emotional investment you make is energy you cannot direct toward other pursuits. When you begin to operate from this understanding, when you start making conscious choices about where you direct your limited resources, something remarkable happens. People begin to notice that you are not infinitely available. They begin to realize that your attention has become something they need to earn rather than something they can assume. This shift requires a fundamental rewiring of how you think about relationships and social dynamics. Most people operate from a place of scarcity mindset about connections. They fear that if they don't constantly give, constantly accommodate, constantly make themselves available, they will lose the relationships they have. But this fear-based approach creates the very outcome they're trying to avoid. When you operate from desperation, when you cling too tightly, when you make yourself too available, you communicate that you don't believe you have other options. And if you don't believe you have options, why should anyone else believe you're worth pursuing? The power of scarcity lies not in being absent, but in being selective. It's not about disappearing from people's lives or becoming cold and unresponsive. It's about becoming someone whose time and attention have value because they are not distributed carelessly. When you start saying no to things that don't align with your priorities, when you stop being available at all hours for every minor drama or request, when you begin to reserve your highest quality attention for people and situations that truly matter, something interesting happens. The people in your life start to recognize that access to you is not a given. This recognition changes everything. Suddenly, when you do show up, your presence carries weight. When you do invest your time in someone, they understand that you've made a choice, that you could have been elsewhere, with someone else, doing something else, but you chose to be with them. This transforms the entire dynamic of the relationship. Instead of taking your presence for granted, they begin to appreciate it. Instead of assuming you'll always be there, they begin to value the moments when you are. But here's where most people get this wrong. They think scarcity means being difficult, playing hard to get in some juvenile way, or creating artificial barriers for the sake of appearing unavailable. This is not scarcity. This is game playing, and it backfires because it's transparent and manipulative. True scarcity comes from having a life so full of purpose, passion, and meaningful pursuits that you genuinely don't have unlimited time for everyone and everything. It comes from being someone who has developed standards about how you spend your time and with whom you spend it. The difference is authenticity. When you're genuinely busy building something meaningful, pursuing your goals, developing your skills, or investing in your own growth, your limited availability comes from a place of abundance, not artifice. People can sense the difference. They can tell when someone is pretending to be busy versus actually being engaged in important work. They can feel the difference between someone who is playing games and someone who has simply become more selective about where they invest their energy. This is where Hobbes's insights become particularly relevant. In his view, humans are constantly engaged in a competition for power, resources, and recognition. But most people compete poorly because they don't understand the rules of the game. They think power comes from pleasing everyone, from being indispensable through availability, from never saying no. But this strategy makes them weak, not powerful. True power comes from understanding that your presence, your attention, your approval are resources that become more valuable when they are not freely distributed to everyone who asks. When you begin to operate from this understanding, when you start to see your time and attention as valuable commodities that should be invested wisely rather than spent carelessly, you begin to command a different kind of respect. People start to pay attention when you speak because they know you don't speak carelessly. They start to value your company because they know it's not something they can take for granted. They start to seek your approval because they understand it's not given lightly. This shift in how others perceive you happens gradually, but the effects compound over time. As you become more selective about your commitments, you naturally gravitate toward higher quality relationships and opportunities. As you stop wasting time on people who don't value your presence, you create space for those who do. As you begin to treat yourself as someone whose time has value, others begin to treat you the same way. This isn't magic. It's the natural result of changing your own behavior and expectations. The obsession that others develop when you become scarce is not really about you becoming more attractive or interesting. Though these things may happen as side effects, the obsession comes from a fundamental shift in the power dynamic. When you are always available, you exist in a position of low power in the relationship. You are the one seeking approval, seeking connection, seeking validation. When you become scarce, You force others into that position. Now they are the ones wondering what you think of them, whether you'll make time for them, whether they matter to you. This reversal of power dynamics is perhaps the most profound change that occurs when you embrace scarcity. Suddenly, instead of chasing others for validation, approval, or attention, you find others beginning to chase you. Instead of wondering if people like you or value you, you find them demonstrating through their actions that they do. Instead of feeling like you need to prove your worth, you find others working to prove theirs to you. But this power comes with responsibility. Once you understand these dynamics, once you begin to see how human behavior responds to scarcity and abundance, you have a choice to make. You can use this knowledge to manipulate others for selfish gain, or you can use it to create healthier, more balanced relationships. The wise person chooses the latter. They understand that the goal is not to make others suffer or to play psychological games, but to establish relationships based on mutual respect and genuine appreciation rather than desperation and dependence. The deeper lesson here is about self-respect and self-worth. When you make yourself constantly available, when you drop everything for others regardless of how they treat you, when you accept scraps of attention and call it love, you are communicating something important, not just to others, but to yourself. You are saying that your time has no value, that your priorities don't matter, that you don't deserve to be pursued or appreciated. This communication happens at a subconscious level, but it affects everything about how you move through the world. Conversely, when you begin to treat your time as valuable, when you set boundaries around your availability, when you choose quality over quantity in your relationships, you send a different message. You tell the world, and more importantly, you tell yourself, that you are someone worth pursuing, someone whose attention has value, someone who deserves reciprocal effort and appreciation. This shift in self-perception is perhaps more important than any change in how others see you. The path to embracing scarcity begins with honest self-reflection. Look at your current relationships and ask yourself hard questions. Who are you always available for, and how do they treat that availability? Who takes your presence for granted, and who genuinely appreciates it? Who invests as much in the relationship as you do, and who simply takes what you offer without giving much in return? These questions will reveal patterns that may be uncomfortable to acknowledge, but acknowledgement is the first step toward change. Once you begin to see these patterns clearly, you can start making different choices. You can begin to reserve your highest quality time and attention for people who reciprocate your investment. You can start saying no to requests that don't align with your priorities or come from people who consistently take more than they give. You can begin to create space between stimulus and response, choosing when and how to engage rather than automatically saying yes to every demand on your time. This process is not easy, especially at first. You may feel guilty about being less available. You may worry that people will be angry or disappointed. You may fear that you'll lose relationships that you value. Some of these fears may be realized. When you stop being endlessly available, some people may indeed become frustrated or may drift away. But here's the crucial insight. The people who leave when you start valuing yourself were never really there for you in the first place. They were there for what you provided, not for who you are. The relationships that survive this transition, the people who respect your boundaries and appreciate your time even when it's not unlimited, these are your real relationships. These are the people who see you as a complete person with your own needs, goals, and priorities, not just as a resource to be exploited. When you stop accepting relationships based on your availability and start insisting on relationships based on mutual respect and appreciation, the quality of your social life improves dramatically, even if the quantity decreases. This is where Hobbes's understanding of human nature becomes particularly relevant. He recognized that in a world without constraints, people will take whatever they can get from others. But when there are boundaries, when there are limits, when taking advantage comes with consequences, people behave differently. They become more considerate, more appreciative, more respectful. Your scarcity creates those natural boundaries that lead others to treat you better. The transformation that occurs when you embrace scarcity extends far beyond your relationships with others. It affects how you see yourself, how you make decisions, how you prioritize your time, and how you pursue your goals. When you begin to treat your time as valuable, you naturally become more selective about how you spend it. You start to eliminate activities that don't serve your long-term interests. You begin to focus on pursuits that align with your values and contribute to your growth. This focus and selectivity compound over time, leading to better outcomes in every area of your life. When you're not constantly scattered, trying to please everyone and be everything to everybody, you can direct your energy toward the things that truly matter to you. You can pursue mastery in your chosen fields. You can build deeper, more meaningful relationships with people who appreciate your investment. You can work toward goals that actually fulfill you rather than goals you think will make others happy. The obsession that others develop when you become scarce is really a reflection of this transformation. They're not just noticing your absence, they're noticing your presence when you do appear. They're seeing someone who has focus, purpose, direction. They're encountering someone who has become more interesting because they've become more interested in their own life. They're meeting someone who has developed confidence and self-respect, qualities that are naturally attractive and compelling. But perhaps the most important aspect of this transformation is the relationship you develop with yourself. When you stop seeking external validation through constant availability and instead start validating yourself through conscious choices about how you spend your time, you develop a different kind of confidence. You stop needing others to approve of you because you've learned to approve of yourself. You stop fearing rejection because you've learned to reject what doesn't serve you. This internal shift is what makes the external changes sustainable. You're not playing a role or following a strategy. You're becoming someone who naturally commands respect because you respect yourself. You're developing into someone who naturally attracts quality relationships because you've learned to maintain quality standards. You're evolving into someone who naturally seems scarce and valuable because you've learned to value your own time and energy. The final lesson in all of this is perhaps the most profound. The people who become obsessed with you when you become scarce were always capable of that level of interest and investment. They simply had no reason to demonstrate it when you were freely available. By creating scarcity, you don't change who they are. You reveal who they are. You discover who is genuinely interested in you versus who is simply taking advantage of your availability. You learn who will invest effort to maintain a connection with you versus who expects you to do all the work. This revelation can be both liberating and sobering. It's liberating because it shows you that you are more valued than you realized. People were simply taking that value for granted. It's sobering because it reveals how many of your relationships were based on convenience rather than genuine appreciation. But both of these insights are valuable. They help you understand where you truly stand with people, and they help you make better decisions about where to invest your limited time and energy. The obsession that emerges when you become scarce is not the goal. It's simply the natural result of people recognizing value that was always there but previously taken for granted. The real goal is to build a life where your time, attention, and presence are treated as the valuable resources they are, first by you, and consequently by others. When you achieve this, you don't need to worry about being valued or appreciated. It happens naturally, as a byproduct of how you've learned to value and appreciate yourself. Remember this. In a world where most people are desperately seeking attention, validation, and approval, the person who doesn't need these things becomes infinitely more interesting. In a culture where everyone is always available, always responding, always saying yes, the person who has learned to be selective becomes magnetic. In a society where people have forgotten how to value their own time, the person who treats their time as precious becomes someone others want to be around. You have a choice. You can continue to make yourself endlessly available, hoping that others will eventually appreciate your sacrifice and dedication. Or you can begin to understand that appreciation comes not from abundance, but from scarcity, not from always being there, but from being worth waiting for, not from giving everything to everyone, but from being selective about who deserves your best. The choice you make will determine not just how others see you, but how you see yourself. Choose wisely. Your life, your relationships, and your self-respect depend on it.